Our session this morning and now is going to feature Graham Brown from Mediasense and the Global Media Director for Adidas, Simon Peel. Unfortunately, Simon has been involved in so many conversations and been networking with so many of you that he has lost his voice. So he is going to do his best to talk in a very, as someone just described, sexy, husky voice on stage. He sounds a bit like someone on late night on Radio 2, but he's going to do his best. If he cannot manage to speak or his voice completely dies halfway through, he has a very able runner in his sidekick, Andy Pilkington. So he is going to be our runner, hence the cricket analogy. So if he can't speak the words, Andy will transcribe for him. He is just here in case you need to see Andy. He has a microphone ready to speak, but without further ado, let's welcome Graham and Simon to the stage. Yes.
Thank you very much. Come on, Simon. This is for you, Pilko. In case we need to.
Hello. I look like a criminal and I sound like a criminal.
You sound like Marlon Brando in The Godfather. Here you go. Right, Simon, we're going to... So, Simon, good morning. Keep drinking. I've been stuffing him full of tablets and stuff all morning to try and keep him going. I suspect a number of people have been coming up to me, and they've been coming up to you over the last 24 hours saying, what's happening with the Adidas Global Pitch? Well, firstly, we can't say anything about that. And secondly, we're here to talk about agency models, not about the pitch, although I guess we'll touch upon it during the conversation. So where I wanted to start, I wanted to roll back, Simon, about 3 or 4 years when you took the brave decision to insource a lot of your digital and capabilities and build your own tech stack. Now, nowadays, lots of people are talking about it, and it's become quite a hot topic, and it's happening quite widely. But you did that 3 to 4 years ago, and you did it with us. And I'm just wondering, with the benefit of hindsight, because we all have 20/20 vision in hindsight, was that the right decision at the time?
Yes. It was a very good decision. So there were a couple of things that we did. I'm so sorry about this. So there were a couple of things that we did. We insourced paid search and affiliates. That was done by our performance team, which was very much focused on e-commerce and specific KPIs. And we did that in part because we believed that we were going to be more effective and it was going to be cheaper than going through the agency. God, this is sinister, isn't it? Who's scared?
I feel like I should be answering your questions for you.
I'm very scared. So, and then we also insourced a lot of the ad technology. So about 4 years ago, Adidas was really struggling as a business. We were kind of at our lowest point for a number of years. Our share prices were the lowest they've ever been. And we had this new business strategy come in. It was called Creating the New. And it was all centred around growth. Like, how do we... don't laugh. How do we drive growth for the business? And by putting the consumer first. So the reason why we insourced the infrastructure for the tech stack is because it was about transparency, trying to understand what our audiences were up to, how we could talk to them properly, and really focus on that area. So for us, it was all about cost effectiveness and how it drove growth.
I'm not going to make you talk about your CEO's 7-point strategy, because I think that might just send you over the top. But we were going to talk about that. But one of the things that you and I have talked about over the last few years is about, you talked about just now about cost effectiveness, is about cost efficiency. And it may be a surprise to some of the people in this room that actually for you, cost efficiency per se is far less important than it used to be. And so I was just, if you can, we'd be interested to hear why a global business like Adidas thinks that cost efficiency is possibly less important than it used to be.
I think it's this thing about race to the bottom and KPIs that were particularly, they're vanity KPIs, a lot of them. So with cost efficiency, certainly you're looking at cost per click or cost per impression or cost per thousand. And that's kind of why we insourced elements of it, because we were focused on that efficiency. But ultimately, does that drive growth? And that's a question that we've had internally quite a lot. So we talked about what metrics do you need? Is it viewability? What level of viewability do you need? Is engagement important? So we tried to move away from very cost-centric KPIs to more about outcomes, business, like using media as a vehicle to drive business outcomes. It's very difficult to do, just like it's very difficult to speak. But that's why it's less important to us. So we're much more focused about what can we learn that will drive the business forward. So cost effectiveness is much more important to us.
You're doing well. Thank you.
Sorry.
I'm going to ask my own question, Simon, to help you out. Because when you approached us a while ago, you said, actually, do you know, Graham, we're thinking of going to pitch. It was at a time when we had been talking a lot about your future. And we surprised you. I remember the meeting when I said, you can't do that, you're not ready. And I remember you saying to me, what do you mean? Everybody else tells us we should do it, but you're telling me we shouldn't. Why? And that was the question you were going to ask me, but I'm going to help you out here. And I think what we had heard over the years that we've been working together, and the new CEO strategy, which had been talked about widely in the business, about this one Adidas, about the fact that you wanted to have this single customer focus, that one Adidas meant that you had to be far more integrated than you had ever been before, that you had to treat the customers as individuals rather than as large demographic groups. But because of that you needed to have, you weren't ready for a new partner, basically. And I think one of the really interesting things is that many clients will go through a process of change in the hope that if they, in the expectation that even though they keep doing the same thing, they'll end up in a different place. And of course they don't. And that's what we talked about. And the reason why we said you're not ready to go to pitch over about a year ago is because we said, you had significant, and many clients in this room will probably empathize with this, you had significant global local challenges insofar as your global and local teams, and you operate, there's 40 markets on this chart, but there's over 70 that you're really that you have a presence in. That global, local, regional had not yet been addressed. You had this incredible ambition to grow the business almost exponentially in terms of both the brand, the intermediated part of the business, to 16 billion. And by 2020, I mean, when you were talking to us, you said, we have ambition to grow .com from less than 2 billion to 4 billion by 2020, but they were operating in silos. And that won't be an unfamiliar territory to a number of people. And then, of course, you had this BU, this BU challenge with maybe originals versus soccer versus all the other sporting shoes that you have. And so what we said to you is we have to get the internal sorted before, or you have to get the internal sorted before you can go to the external, because otherwise all you'll be doing is transporting it.
So, are we ready now, Graham?
We're going to keep going. So you we went through your business with a fine-tooth comb, and we've travelled the world with you. And I think that where you've gotten to is there is never a good time for change. you and I both have young children. We've talked about there's never a good time to have, to get married. There's never a good time to have children, move home, move jobs, and certainly, undertake a significant agency review. However, you've gone on. What you've done is the hard yards, in my view. And what I've seen you do is you've diagnosed these big global, local e-com, BU, e-com versus .com challenges. You've diagnosed the problem, and you're taking significant steps to reorganize your business, which is really hard to change the wheels whilst the bus is going at 100 miles an hour. But that's the really hard part, but you've done that. So in terms of the 3 stages, I guess what you've got is you've done the diagnosis, you're changing internally, and now you're ready to address the external. And I think that is the journey that is the right journey to go on, rather than jumping into this significant agency model reconstruction, which we're going to come and Tom and talk more about. So you've gone on this journey, and we've been part of that journey. And I know it hasn't been easy. And if it's possible, can you briefly, and maybe Pilco can help you if need be, just briefly talk about how difficult this process has been and what change is happening in the business as a result of it.
Sure. Sorry. So it's been
yeah.
It has been a pain in the arse. It's been
thanks.
Absolute nightmare. So we have a lot of problems internally in terms of dysfunctionality as a consequence of different teams being custodians of media. So different people wanted to do different things for their own individual KPIs. And I think that addressing that has been fundamental. What we did a few years ago is we tried to make our agency contract transparent. But transparency is not free. It comes with a cost. So whilst we did it, we said to the agency, look, we understand what's going on in the industry at the moment to a certain degree. And what we want to do is we want to pay you properly. We want to pay you for performance. We want to pay you to have the same KPIs as us and help us drive growth. So we changed that a couple of years ago, and that had implications on our KPIs and on team structure and process. But it also meant that internally, when we came to do this kind of organisational shift, Mediasense were already known. They were already a trusted partner, especially with the marketing teams, who previously the KPIs that we had were much more focused around cost efficiency and savings. So working with a partner where we were much more focused about what brings the best out of the brand really helped. And then from an e-commerce side, the guys had worked with Mediasense in terms of sort of insourcing elements to it and building the structure. So I think a lot of the barriers where people were probably concerned about the reorganisation that we were going to have to undertake, those barriers weren't so high. And I think that's a credit to Mediasense, but also, a credit to the people internally. So what's been happening along with our business strategies, we've been trying to identify what adidas means. Like, who is it? What does it represent to us consumers? And we have this business strategy, which I can't possibly talk you through, but one of the key areas of it is about culture. So our internal culture. We have these things called the 3 C's. So creativity. We believe that creativity is the greatest driver of profitability. We believe by allowing people to unleash their creativity, it's going to help us. Then we have this thing around collaboration. So working with other people, working with third parties. Yeah. And that certainly helped us internally in terms of addressing different types of KPIs. And then the final thing is confidence. We're a German company, and there's a lot of bureaucracy and risk aversion. And I think what we're trying to do is overcome that and say, look, we're prepared to try things, we're prepared to break things, we're prepared to do presentations when you can't even speak. So that whole approach, I think, really helped us. And again, it's about this focus on consumer centricity.
So let's just talk specifically about some of the changes. And actually, to spare your voice for later in the session, these are some of the these are the 5 key areas that we work with you on, and they're the 5 key changes that you're making. And I think that you've been quite brave, and in fact, the agent and you expect your agencies to share in the journey that you're going on. And maybe we can just talk briefly, go back and forth a little bit, because people changes. As a result of of the last year, there are people who are moving roles. There are departments that are coming together. We can talk a little bit maybe about this new hybrid model, because you are not reversing the outsource model, but you're bringing it into a more hybrid model where you will work with both, where agencies will have a specific role and the internal organisation will have roles. Bringing a whole change in terms of accountability, which another thing we'll touch on in a moment, in terms of these shared KPIs, so that .com is aligned with brand and vice versa, and global and local are bigger together, and all that embedded in business rules. Of course, there has to be training. Has that been, that's a lot of change, as well as going through this, as well as trying to get to, 4 billion in .com and 16 billion in intermediated in retail. The business, what's been the single biggest challenge of all of this for you, particularly from the media perspective?
The biggest thing is actually this one tenet of our strategies, the 7 points within our business strategy, and there's 4 of them they're called accelerators. And the biggest one from it is this one adidas, which there was a slide on earlier, and it is genuinely about how do people experience adidas, how do we make it the optimal experience, and how do we come together as teams to do that? Because if you have one department going off with their agencies and paying them a certain way for a certain activity, you've got another team going off and doing the same thing. It doesn't deliver that sort of synchronised business result that you want. So that one adidas and the people change has been the most difficult, because it's very political. People become very risk averse. I'm scared myself.
You don't need to be.
But the hybrid model, we're still going to retain that. So we believe that we need to build an infrastructure that allows us and the agency greater flexibility. So even within the agencies, the way that the operating models have existed arguably have affected the way that stuff is put forward, that, where we should invest. And we're trying to relinquish that from the agency by paying them more. Right? We want to pay our agency more. And again, that comes back to the shared KPIs. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does, Simon.
So, given all of that, Graham, do you think we're operationally ready to pitch now?
Well, sorting out yourselves, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? We work with like gig economy businesses like Just Eat and disruptive changes like Ocado, and you are a change. You are a change agent, and I think it was Peter Drucker who said, strategy. I mean, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And what you've described, with Adidas is this incredible culture that you have. The collaboration, creativity, and confidence. We've seen it in whether you go to Portland, Herzog, Amsterdam, or Shanghai. That those core beliefs are absolutely clear. They're the things that you're looking for in the model, but there's also some other things which we were really surprised at, because a lot of companies pay lip service to this sustainability, diversity, and equality, and we've heard about it on this stage earlier today, which is fantastic. But you actually really, really do, as a company, live it. Try to find a plastic bottle anywhere within the Adidas campuses, you won't do it. You simply can't do that. You really live it, which is fantastic. But you're developing your agency model, Simon. some of the things that your expectations are really interesting. You talk about vanity KPIs. We've talked a lot about that, these vanity KPIs. We've talked about paying agencies properly and even bonusing people on your account. Now, to those people in this room, some of whom have been on the rough edge of the transparency debate, and some of whom have had significant issues around rebates and other things that have been going on in the market, people must be thinking you're off your trolley. Not that you've not only lost your voice, but you're just, you've lost the plot on this. Why is this so important to you, some of these things?
So I think that diversity is a really important issue, and it's a big area of focus within our company, and it should be a big area of focus within the wider economy. And it was part of our approach to our agencies, was to talk about diversity, because a diverse range of people represents the diverse audience that we have. So that's really important. Equality is enormously important to me, particularly within the junior levels within an agency. An agency, my interpretation of an agency is that it churns younger, more inexperienced people, and it doesn't pay them fairly for that, but they're typically the people that are working on your account. They're typically the people that are trying to change your business. So we want to build in some sort of egalitarian approach to the remuneration. We want to pay our team specifically better and also look after their long-term careers. So we believe, as an advertiser, it's not just about taking back control, but it's also about taking responsibility. So we have a responsibility to those people that work on our account. So that's really important to us as well. And that kind of is an embodiment of sustainability, because it's about the long-term partnership that we have with the agency.
And all these other issues the aforementioned issues that I raised with you, Simon, those are things that, that you feel we can address, do you?
Yeah, I think the agency model is going through this really diverse change, and everyone's talking about the lack of, over the last couple of years, the lack of transparency. And it's always been on the agency. Right? It's the agency that's stealing from the clients, and that's not true. Clients have created this mess. So, our approach to kind of allowing procurement to drive down cost savings has meant that the agency has had to find different ways of making money, particularly when you commoditise people. Right? So when you apply commission and then you're driving down the commission, the agency still needs to make a profit. So I think taking responsibility for that and really trying to drive change is something that we're trying to do.
But that brings on, in itself, a tremendous responsibility for accountability, because you're a public company, the agencies are public companies, most of them, or many of them are. So that brings quite a significant responsibility in terms of how you're going to make the agencies accountable, and indeed make yourselves accountable, because, as you say, it's a two-way street. How are you going to make sure that you realise that, the ambitions? You've got these incredibly lofty and ambitious targets, and your agency will go on that journey with you. How are you going to make sure that at the end of the day that the rubber hits the road and that there is accountability built into the system?
Well, the KPI framework and the measurement is your problem, Graham. That's with Mediasense.
Okay,
but,
I'll take that.
We have looked at the KPI framework a couple of times. So we looked at it about 4 years ago when we redid the contract the first time, and we redid it recently. So as we bring brand and e-commerce together, we've worked diligently across teams to figure out what the right KPIs are. And it's interesting because the ones that I may have thought were important didn't end up on the list, and the ones that e-commerce thought were important didn't end up on the list.
Exactly, yeah.
So there's redefining the KPI framework, but the other thing is having flexibility within that KPI framework, so not being beholden to it. So if we understand that one KPI drives a certain type of growth or a certain type of behaviour, can we optimise to that?
Yeah.
So the flexibility within the KPI framework is really important. The other big area in terms of accountability is bringing the teams together and having governance. So again, because we were in silos, and because we have the problems with global and local, we have the problems with e-commerce brand and business units being beholden to their own KPIs. It means that everyone is going off and doing their own thing, so bringing that all together is a huge thing for accountability, having us all focused on the same thing. There's an analogy that our CEO has, which is basically, you can't all kick the football at the same time. You need to work as a team to deliver the goal, and people have different roles and responsibilities. So that's definitely an area.
I do remember, the change was on the way when your head of e-commerce said to me, I'm responsible for the brand NPS score. And a few weeks later, the head of your CMO was talking about the fact that I'm equally responsible for that 4 billion e-com target. That is the best evidence of change.
Yeah, they're shared. And that's the approach with the agency model as well. I mean, the question is obviously about the agency operating model, and I'm not an expert to comment on like how WPP and Dentsu and Omnicom should structure. But what we are trying to do as an advertiser is ensure that their remuneration, their structure reflects our solidified approach. So we want the same from them, and we want to make sure that they're on the journey together with us.
But very importantly, we've talked about the agency models. They're not there to mirror you. We've talked about this change because there's been this huge thing in the industry where agencies look to build their models to reflect, to mirror their clients. And one of the big changes that we've been talking about is the fact that they're there to complement you rather than mirror you. And that's actually quite a big change.
Yeah, I think if they mirrored us, there'd be a bit of a disgraceful mess at times. So, yeah, that's not what we want. We need an agency to complement the approach that we're going through. Sorry, I missed my question. So, apologies.
I'm going to talk about the agency models going forwards, because I think what we've one of the questions that's, of course, central to this whole conversation is the different types of agency models that are prevalent in the industry. And we're not going to talk specifically about where you're going for obvious reasons, but 2 years ago, in 2015, we did Media 2020. We did Media 2020 Refresh last year, which was a research amongst some advertisers. But it's not about our research, it's about what's come out of that research and what we've seen in the marketplace going forwards. And what we're seeing is basically the agency models falling into four quadrants, really. And advertisers are adopting, not necessarily just in one quadrant, but they're working, they're taking bits of all of them. And just to quickly go through that, there's the outsource model, which is what we're calling the holding company model, where you completely outsource everything. And recently, you would have seen the most recent team being built, Team Energy for BP. That is an outsource model. Now, even they have, and I'm not breaking any confidences here, includes some best of breed. So they include some flexibility as well. You do that. You have both you have an outsourced agency, you have some flexibility as well in best of breed in certain disciplines, and to a small extent, you're bringing some capabilities in-house. And we are seeing that happening quite in certain areas, particularly where there is direct customer access and direct accountability for sales. And Nikki was talking about this in her presentation earlier in the previous one. So that in-house, that accountability is with the in-house. And then we're seeing this new area, which is the on-site agency. You do very little of it, bringing agencies into your organization. But that is the other quadrant that we are seeing clients consider. So the four of those will have the adoption of those four different models will be dependent upon, obviously, this level of sophistication of the advertiser, their capabilities of that advertiser, where they are located, and the availability of resource, which is a critical piece. The willingness to bring people in-house is another thing, because there is many different levels of confidentiality and issues that need to be taken into consideration. And the on-site idea is one that is taking hold, but is not widespread yet. But I think those are the four models, and I know that most of our clients will fall into those quadrants, and you do and will.
Where are we?
Do you want me to answer that? At the moment, you have the holding company. You're an outsourced business. You have, as you know, some relationships, and I'm not going to give lots of publicity to different companies, but you've got some outsourced best of breed capability, particularly, for example, in the programmatic area in Europe. You've brought some things in-house, which we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, like search and your own tech stack. And you've got some of the agency on site, particularly in the social capability in the States. So you've got a combination of those, primarily rooted, I guess, in the bottom half rather than the top half, I would suggest. But I'm not going to say now where you're going to end up in a few months' time. But we've got about less than a minute left, so I'm just going to very quickly, Simon, ask you for your top 3 observations on agency models going forwards. Your top 3.
Pay for talent and quality. Pay. Media is an investment, so driving business outcomes, not savings. And as an advertiser, take responsibility. It's not necessarily control, it's about responsibility. And yours?
Well, one of the things that we've talked about a lot today, Simon, is growth. Media as a vehicle for growth. And with growth, therefore, it gets visibility. And I don't think this financial transparency and accountability is going to go away anytime soon. So I think that is going to continue. I think that models are going to become much more flexible. I think that advertisers need the flexibility to be able to swap resources in and out, to outsource, insource, and use in projects not necessarily fully retained capabilities. That is going to happen more and more, not just for cost, but also for excellence as well. And finally, I think that if we are generally going to move into a time of delivery of dynamic creative, then we are going to have to see creative and media become much, much closer together in order to be able to deliver that. Our time is up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. Well done.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Much appreciated.
Do we have any time for questions or not?
Yeah, you can have. I thought you were going to do it from there. So, any questions from the audience?
There's one there behind you.
Okay, we've got a microphone here and one there. Okay, no problem. We've got 2 questions there.
Thanks for powering through that. That took some grit. You talked about some things that maybe are beyond marketing, like one adidas. And what about things like operationally supply chain or things like that that impact, especially an aggressive growth goal on e-com? How much are you involved in that? How much of a challenge is that? How do you handle that?
So we're not actually directly involved in it, but it is happening. So in terms of supply chain, logistics, operational setup, it's all being addressed, and everything is being addressed concurrently. It's like this huge drive. So we're aware of it, and we work with the teams that are involved in it. We actually have a specific sort of brand commerce team that are related to the supply chain. So we talk about the implications that has on media. So are you going to advertise a product that's not on the website? It's a problem that we've got. Are we promoting things that aren't available? Like we have something called Yeezy, which is Kanye West shoe. Are we promoting that? I think one of the things that we're discovering slowly, unfortunately, but is that when we advertise a certain product, it has this big halo effect on the rest of the business. So that's also beneficial. It's making us understand, well, okay, maybe we need a better CRM approach when the product's not available in the supply chain. But maybe we also need to understand that other products will sell. So it's all kind of happening concurrently, but we're not directly involved in it.
And we had one other question just there, Hassan.
Hi there. That was really, really useful. I'm going to be a bit boring and ask you about the vanity KPIs that you talked about. I mean, it's also commonly known as trading KPIs. So first of all, obviously, when you take the tech stack in-house, like on search, you can control. You don't need to care about the trading KPIs anymore. Therefore, you can just move straight to the business KPIs. The two questions. One is, how do you deal with the traditional media? And the other one is, when you are paying your agencies fairly, which is a great model, is how do you deal
They
with...
would tell you we don't.
How do you deal with conflict of interest when the agency groups are actually both the media owner and the media agency?
So I'll start with the first one, if that's okay. Sorry, the latter question. So we deliberately try to avoid where there is conflict of interest. As it probably is with everyone, it's stipulated very clearly in our contract that it needs to be very visible, and that we have a choice whether we buy into it or not, and what that stake is. I think historically our contracts have been at an agency level, and we're moving them to a holding company level, which will help give us a greater level of clarity. And again, that's where it kind of comes into play with, okay, you pay fairly, because otherwise the agency previously moved money around the different subsections. So the answer to that one is basically we avoid any conflict of interest. We don't buy into principal buying. The trading desk uses our technology, and the trading team is part of our contractual team as well. So we try to mitigate for conflict of interest as much as possible. And then on the vanity KPIs. So what we found is the KPIs that we are using, particularly for digital, aren't driving incremental business. And that's particularly true in paid search and in retargeting. So I won't mention the company, but we worked with a company who was driving a lot of sales to our website in terms of retargeting. We ran an incrementality test, and our KPIs were cost per click or cost of sale. And we ran a series of incrementality tests, and we realised that the incrementality was less than 2%. So we were investing significantly, giving this arguably not the nicest user experience, and it wasn't driving business outcomes. It was driving a KPI that was in place to enable our team to pat themselves on the back. And then offline, is included in the standard KPI framework. We've gone back to basics quite a lot. So we're real advocates of Peter Field and Les Binet and their approach to media effectiveness. And essentially what they say is, awareness is key, salience is key. So we've gone back to focusing on GRPs because we believe we need to get maximum reach to generate sales within the category.
Thank you.
Okay. No problems.
Thank you very much, Simon and Graham. We've had some injured people on stage before, but it's been a broken hand or a broken leg, but someone without a voice when they're speaking is pretty impressive.